Good afternoon. California once promised the most successful, regulated cannabis market in the world. Yet today, that system is collapsing. According to the California Department of Cannabis Control, more than 60% of all cultivation licenses have disappeared since 2021 as operators shut down or abandon the legal market. This is not simply an economic inconvenience, it's a structural failure with statewide consequences for rural communities, tax revenue, environmental oversight, and consumer safety. When an industry loses more than half its licensed operators in less than 3 years, it signals a crisis that demands immediate attention. This collapse affects farmers, supply chain workers, consumers, and the integrity of California's regulatory system itself. The cause of the collapse is documented extensively in academic, governmental, and economic research. Legal operators cannot survive the current tax and regulatory system. Research in the California Journal of Politics and Policy confirms that many cannabis businesses face combined local and state taxes reaching 60 to 70%, far exceeding the tax burdens placed on any other agricultural or commercial industry, according to Ruggles on page 22. This means that even efficient, compliant operators cannot compete economically. Britannica Academica's overview of illicit drug markets clearly states that when legal markets are overtaxed or inaccessible, illicit markets strengthen and expand. That is exactly what California is experiencing. The illicit market now outsells the legal market by a wide margin. A 2023 doctoral dissertation from the University of California found that California's regulatory framework creates systematic barriers that disproportionately harm small and mid-scale farms, particularly in rural counties that depend on cannabis as their primary agricultural product, according to Martinez on page 88. The consequences are already visible. Farms are closing, workers are laid off, local economies are shrinking, and a growing illicit market that operates without paying taxes, following environmental concerns or regulations, and undergoing product testing. So, since we can clearly see the severity of this problem, we now need to examine a solution supported by credible research and proven outcomes. The most effective solution, supported by multiple sources, is to support statewide cannabis tax reform by signing the Real Petition on the California Change.gov petitions platform. This petition specifically calls for the elimination of the cultivation tax and a restructuring of excise taxes. The California Legislative Analyst's Office shows that removing the cultivation tax would expand legal participation and reduce the illicit market activity because legal prices would finally become competitive with the illegal market, according to California LAO 4. Peer-reviewed research in the Agricultural Finance Review found that lowering taxes in heavily regulated agricultural sectors increases the compliance rates, improves market participation, and leads to a greater long-term tax revenue, according to Walker on page 112. Additional research from the Journal of Rural Policy Studies shows that the rural agricultural industries stabilize when tax burdens are reduced, especially in areas already experiencing economic hardship. This is said by Taylor on page 57. In other words, tax reform is not a financial break. It's a structural correction supported by economic and policy research. Now that we understand how the solution will work, we can visualize what will happen if this reform is adopted and what will happen if we ignore this. If we take no action, the downward trend will continue. More farms will close, more rural economies will collapse, and more operators will either quit or turn to the illicit market to survive. This will result in less consumer safety testing, less environmental oversight, fewer jobs, decreased tax revenue, and the erosion of any progress made throughout legalization. California will be left with a legal industry that exists only on paper. But if tax reform occurs, the opposite future unfolds. Legal operators stabilize, prices become competitive, the illicit market shrinks, and state agencies regain the ability to enforce meaningful regulations. Rural communities, particularly Humboldt, Mendocino, and Trinity counties, can retain their agricultural workforce and tax base. Consumers gain safer products. The legal supply chain becomes more robust. And California finally achieves what legalization was intended to create: a workable, transparent, equitable cannabis market. Understanding these two possible futures makes the next steps clear. Your individual action matters. Your action today is simple, direct, and highly effective. Please go to the CaliforniaChange.gov petitions platform and sign the publicly archived petition urging lawmakers to eliminate the cultivation tax and reform the statewide cannabis tax structure. Policymakers track signatures closely because they provide measurable evidence of public support. Signing the petition takes less than 1 minute, but collectively, thousands of signatures have the power to influence the legislative committees, budget decisions, and tax policy. By signing, you help stabilize an industry that supports thousands of jobs, millions in state revenue, and the long-term sustainability of California's legal cannabis marketplace. Thank you.